Okay, so thank you all for coming out tonight and joining us for the Australian Architects Declare Sustainable Action Plan event, getting a sustainable action plan for your practice. So this is a continuation of a series that we've run in, say, Melbourne, Sydney and Perth, and we'll be continuing that on in the other capital cities to the end of this year and into next year as we go. So obviously, just like to acknowledge we're here on Kaurna land and respect the Kaurna culture and their connection to the lands ongoing, and that we respect their leaders past, present and emerging. So on that note, we'll start to roll on. Oh, before I do that, while I've got our partners listed there, I won't forget to thank them. The Australian Institute of Architects, the Emerging Architects Network, the Associated Consulting Architects, Parlour, and the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects, all those people for putting the event out on their social media. And a big thank you to the ASBN as the foremost body probably in Adelaide for promoting sustainability in the built environment. And Hubble, who have kindly donated the venue tonight for us. So that's a nil cost to us. And Marco, I'll grab in a minute to just have a quick word about that. And thank you to Cafe Troppo and Troppo for putting up for the food tonight. So yeah, and then also the universities, which have also done some promotion for us. So before I get started, I might just give the floor to Marco, just to give us a little word on Hubble and as a thank you for giving us the use of the venue tonight. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. What a turnout. Great to see a lot of people interested in these topics. My name is Marco Salinas. I'm co-founder at Hubble, and welcome to Stone and Chalk. This is where we work. How many of you have been here before? Yes, a couple. Excellent. So here at Stone and Chalk, we develop or we work together with most of the brilliant startups in innovation. We use artificial intelligence to try to bridge the gap and explain the benefits of sustainable living. One of our rituals as a startup is that usually here, every time we got a win, we ring that bell. And what I'm going to do now, just because we are here, is perhaps show you and give you a little bit of that atmosphere of what is actually working on a startup. So, so with that, I welcome you all, and please, for everyone that is here, we would like to offer free access to Hubble. You only need to scan that QR code, and welcome. Thanks.
Go back in, Ken. Yeah. Right. Broken them, okay. Didn't want to lose our bond. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Ken. And yeah, so just further Marco thing, I guess the Architects Declare, part of our approach to things is to partner with startups and people pushing the cutting edge to help us address the climate and biodiversity emergency we've got. So it's quite fitting that we're able to have this event here and be hosted by them. So yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Just, you know, my Kaurna language isn't that great, but Manani Padni, which is welcome. And all of you may know this by now, Nina Mani, and then you may respond by saying, Mani, thank you very much. Like everything, you bring things into culture, you talk about them more, they become second nature. So acknowledging the lands and the language is foremost to that. So, and obviously a more formal response, which we went through earlier, I won't repeat that because I probably just a few words out of it. So thank you. So we're all here to, on behalf of Architects Declare, to kickstart sustainable action plans we see that as a really important part for everyone to just take a step back, think about how you operate. And I know a lot of the people here probably are already, pushing along that path, but it's just that old adage that if you don't sort of measure it, you can't assess it and you can't move forward. So the Architects Declare have got a wealth of knowledge on the website. So if you haven't had a look yet, you can log on and have a look at some of these things. So they're tools really for helping you move along the path. There's no right or wrong, as long as, the inertia is moving forward. We'll all move at different paces, but we'll get there. So, and we know what the emergency is about. It's about the amount of carbon that we're producing as an industry. Loosely, 40% is created by our industry, and that's a real critical spot where we can make a difference. And because we create that amount of carbon, we obviously have a lot of say in how that comes to be. So advocacy for change is one of the strong things we want to work to. So where I fit into it, I sit on the National Steering Committee as a director of Troppo, and we've got some regional offices around Australia and 40 plus years of history. And I guess have been known for our sustainability approach, but, doing things and doing measurably are two different things. So our approach now is to put ourselves under a bit more of a microscope and take that step forward with other people. So we know there's a lot of greenwashing going on, so we don't want to be a part of that. We want to actually have a little bit in our backpack that backs it up. So work through that. So part of the Architects Declare initiatives were to get onto green power straight away, which we did in 2019, and that's a really easy offset. A lot of our power, I'm not sure you can see, is the mouse on there? Yeah. So the green represents our electricity, which straight off you can offset, and it falls to the left of the zero, which Ken's cut off down the bottom there, but that's okay. So doing that straight up is really easy. So I'm not sure how many people are doing that, but that's quite easy to do. Not always that easy at the moment with the challenge of actually getting providers to give you power. In 2020, we had initial footprint. So this is 2020 here. Initial footprint, obviously COVID, limited travel and video conferencing made that footprint probably, not valid. Then we moved into 21 and business as usual started to flow back in. We have other things like stationary, vehicle kilometre usage, flights which are not offset through regional carriers and things like that at the time, and flights which are offset. So because of the nature of our work, a lot of our travel creates a carbon footprint, unfortunately. So offsetting that is critical. So 2022 is located here. This grey area here is what's forecast for where we're going to get to. We've also got an office in Darwin, which has a footprint. Amazingly, in Darwin, you can't get green power for want or anything, so you're forced to take the footprint and work from there. That's something that's not a bad thing. We can all offset, which we had with our flights, but what we're going to look to do is bank that carbon footprint, assess it ourselves, and then direct that to discretionary offsets, so you can pick and choose what you want to do. So we have previously done some work with BioR. If anyone doesn't know who they are, that's a Adelaide-based ecological restoration organisation, sites on Kangaroo Island and in Monado, rehabilitating for woodland birds and seed production gardens with threatened species on Kangaroo Island and avenues like that. So you can pick and choose who you want. And the other thing with an ecological footprint, it's discussed that carbon's only 60% of your footprint. So by taking that extra step, you're avoiding any accounting anomalies, and you're actually doing a true representation of what your footprint might be. So it's all relative to where we're at. I might sit back here. I think we had here we go. We've got a cumulative total for our two offices of 26 tonnes. Sorry, put the glasses on. Yes, please interrupt at any time. Young lady, what's your name? Yes. Yes, correct. Correct, yeah. It's how far you want to go down the rabbit hole and all that sort of stuff. So I'll touch on some more of that stuff and how you want to review that. So put the glass on there. So yeah, we run a Darwin. We got Adelaide and Darwin. We got a cumulative, and the thing to do is Sydney. We've got a subtenancy, so it's impossible to calculate that. So you do the honest thing, and you take a Sydney and errors and a rounding of 10% GST. and you create a total, and then you offset it. So, and then to what you're saying, Kirst, is what's all that mean? I mean, it's all numbers until you look at it. These are figures for a car. So down the bottom here, passenger car is listed at that many kilometres, 15,000 average kilometres, gives you a 2.2 tonne effectively. So I guess what we're trying to do with that is work out, where's the relativity for all that thing, like the office is generating 20 out of 30. So we're at staff for 15, 16 people. If everyone drove their car every day and did their 15,000 kilometres, then it'd be about the same. So it's all about quantifiable stuff. And these are pie charts, which probably everyone's seen, just talking about where our emissions sit in the sector. So this is all background for us and understanding where we sit and what we do. So, there's a big residential sector, that's talking about energy and emissions, and where that falls. So trying to make the difference is key for us to understand. Sorry, that's coming off the thing. Not that's a layering of it, yeah. So because that's a hard thing to do, so that gets another level assessment. So at the moment it's just an action plan that forms part of that whole thing. So we'll get to that. So part of that concern, yep. Yeah. Sure, and keep on time and so, these are just another, like over time, floor area houses, for one of the sample, is getting bigger, inversely the population. So, where we have a dip in emissions and things, you can see the emissions down the bottom is starting to increase again. So the challenge comes back at us. And this is just context again, at a glance, embodied energy, recurrent embodied energy, operational energy in a typical brick-veneer house, which not many people here may be doing, but it's a benchmark. So we're just trying to get a comparison of, that's 170 tonnes of CO2 equivalent in a house, which you can divide over the years, but we're trying to understand where we get to. So what this, and you've got componentry of recurrent embodied energy, how that fits into it. So what we like to do is we look at a shelter line. How much shelter do you need? We know we can all start on the left under the tree. You might need a tent, you might need a two-man tent, you might need a bigger, and it goes on. But our role as architects is to challenge our clients and any brief. So I'm just using houses, but any brief, no matter how big, is to challenge that brief and say, where does that sit and how do you approach that? Because the less materials you use, the better off we're going to be. So there's some pretty graphics just to keep you awake with things. But, I guess what we're about is building and experience your environment, I guess, where you sit in a building, how you experience outdoors and how you work through that. So trying to minimise that. This is a small dwelling pod, but, not everything's built that, some of the houses. So how do we do that? So we began our audit in 29. We continually progress through our SAP stages and we reduce our footprint at the source in our buildings and how we travel. And then what we do is we try and offset as a last resort, and we're trying to educate our clients. We want to put it back on those people. We have clients come to us and say, oh, I want to build a sustainable house, and next thing it's this and it's this and this, and all of a sudden I don't think we've ever done a house probably that's had more than 3-car garage, which is, I know some people are doing a lot bigger, but it's really about challenging clients and seeing how green they want to be. How are they greenwashing? So practice what we preach. So everyone's doing their best where they can. So so what we wanted to look at, and there's obviously the Australian Architects Declare have a series of commitments. So what we want to do is isolate those 10 commitments, and these are the numbers you'll see there, 1 to 10, and then we look at how we might, in our office, impart those things. So we've got a measurable approach to doing things, and we can have a look at how we do that. So checklist to work through and go through on those things. I don't need to read these for you guys. We can talk about that. We'll just keep things moving. But so we're just trying to set, and it's all set out in the Architects Declare templates. This is not rocket science. We're not recreating anything. No one's asking everyone to create an award-winning piece of work. We just want to provide everyone with the opportunity with the tools to interpret as much as they want. So we establish then some practice goals, and then we have these: motivate, identity of place, attitude and educate, and data and education. And we slip those commitments into those categories, and we break them down so that people can then look at those different areas and evaluate them and see where they go throughout a project. So once again, some pictures keep you entertained. But once again, I guess what this tells us is We have Indigenous shelter, you know, which sure, we're not going to live in that type of shelter, but there's a certain rawness and it does what it needs to do. And then we move to the bottom figure, which is an addition on an old building, an old established house, but it's an open pavilion. So you live in the garden, you shut it up. Yes, it gets hot. Yes, it gets cold, but you can put on a jumper, you can take a jumper off as things. So I think a lot of the problem is we tend to operate in narrow bands and we need to extend our comfort zone a lot more. So outreaching advocacy is really important to promoting what we're trying to do with our sustainable action plan. We want to educate our clients of the commitment so they have an understanding of what it is. And it's not just a badge that they can have a nice greenhouse, according to them. We want to push them on that. We want to validate this approach on the commitments by measuring them across the areas of the brief. We want to develop a library of tested methods that we can check against things. So these are just tools that are already out there with doing it. So we want to actively partake in ongoing education, and we want to engage in industry aspects of the building environment through the Institute of Architects, through the Architects Declared, through anything Sustainable Building Network. There's just lots of things you can go and do just to you know, advocate an approach. So and then I guess we constantly seek engagement in projects that align with what we want to do: conservation, biodiversity projects, Indigenous health, wellbeing, housing, tourism, self-determination, and environmental education awareness. So it's just a matter of writing those things into you and just saying, well, we're going to do one thing a month, or someone in our office is going to do one thing a month. You got 12 people, well, it's not that hard to do one thing. And the networks you build will be beneficial not only for the end goal, but for your business and just social interaction as well. So we all know circular economy, and that's another thing to think about when we're doing things. How do we incorporate that into our products? What are we using? You know, constant debate about, you know, and the Architects Declare are going to do some lobbying with the Victorian government, the upcoming election, about native forest logging. You know, 20% of native forests that's logged becomes sawn logs. 3% of that gets locked in carbon in high-end use, you know. So we're trying to create a position where we can advocate, well, timber's great, but we don't want to be party to what's going on there. So where's the more sustainable avenue? Go on the flip side, go to pine plantations for structural pine, and that's the monoculture. So there's arguments on either side to be looked at. So the point is to have an opinion, and I guess, and know where you're coming from it. So we're going to that. So just quickly, training education, you know, part of our travel, which creates more carbon footprint, is to experience spaces like that, you know, so, and how you work in those spaces and make minimal impact where you can. The best thing you can do is nothing, but that's not the way we exist. So, yeah. Cool. Typical architecture, disconnect the environment. We've lost a picture there. Oh, there it is. That's sort of fancy, wasn't it? So, yeah. And architecture integrated with the environment. So, you know, playing within that temperature gradient and curve. So acknowledging that, and by doing that, less materials, less occupational energy, less heating and cooling and things like that. So yeah, really basic, you know, we know different outdoor temperatures and diurnal ranges work. We know different buildings respond to it, but they're all, you know, if you've got a lightweight building that might heat up during the day and you come home at the end of the day and you open it up and flush the heat out, well, then that works. So you just got to pick your approach and things like that for your materials. Some nice graphics. There we go. So, you know, just big shaded outdoor circulation areas, things like that. Screens to the west that break the afternoon sun. Just thinking about materiality and stuff. So, yeah. And then getting into the nuts and bolts of what we do. Can I get rid of that? Sorry. We use Climate Clever, which is a really simple app. That we log our bills in. It spits out charts like this, so we can tell you how much tonnage of carbon CO2 equivalent we've got. So we're just little things like that, quite easy to do. They run an app too that you can download and staff can use, and we're hoping to roll out in a bit more detail. So it just helps infiltrate the mainstream. So evaluation reporting we spoke about earlier, and testing where we're at, and then developing categories to work through. So trying to then branch projects in resilient, which are demonstrated resilient thinking, you know, might say it's business as usual possibly, but it's a bit more advanced than that. Innovative, where we're pushing it, and pioneer at the forefront of approach. So, and then obviously there's a whole framework of other assessment tools you can use, and we've listed some of those, yeah. And Yaara might mention the Living Building Challenge when we come through. So There's always some ugly spreadsheets that go with any activity. This is a sustainability matrix which lists down those categories and allows us to talk about these categories and then a whole range of compliance and things that we can use as checklists, really. So it takes a bit of work at the front end to establish those, and you can adjust them to however you want to, but it's really just checking and validating what we're doing so we have a measurable approach. So they're the categories there we're talking about of putting things in from our scorecards, just so we've got a rating. And then just to close off, I guess, might use that term there. My wife is going to come tonight, but she's stood me up, so I might not be in the sustainability category there either. So anyway, so we work from that. And so I guess thanks for coming. That's a QR code to the working group. So if anyone wants to go on to that, we will try and group like-minded people together and just give you some resources to hopefully talk to people, get together and move some things through. So yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you. And yeah, you'll make that bigger. Thank you.
I can do that. Thanks, Cary. All right. Thanks, Cary. Amazing presentation. Very, very informative and very dense. You squeezed 40 years of knowledge into 10, 15 minutes. That was very impressive. Yes, we should. Yeah. Amazing work. Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Yaara from Sharley Architects. We are a fairly large practice. We've got 200 people across 6 states, and yeah, based here started here in Adelaide. Probably our largest office is in Perth, but we're still 54 strong here in Adelaide, so not a small office by any means. And I'd like to join the acknowledgements of the traditional owners of country, Kaurna people, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So when the Sustainability Action Plan idea sort of landed on my desk, it came to me because I'm head of the Sustainability Forum in Sharley. So I lead anything and everything to do with sustainability and regenerative design. And we've actually enrolled to Architects Declare as soon as it was a thing, back in 2019, as soon as it happened. We're like, oh yeah, they're speaking our language, it's precisely what we believe in. We want to be part of this movement and show our commitment. And then when this sort of happened, I went, oh, that sounds like, sounds like a big thing that we need to do. Let's go through it, through the template, and check what does it actually mean. Let's unpack that a little bit. And as I've moved through it, as I went through it with the rest of the forum, the members in the forum, we realized that a lot of these things we were already actually doing as part of the NSF, the Sustainability Forum that we run. So I'll take you through it and explain it a little bit. So the NSF was established in 2019. Previously, we had sort of separate people doing sustainability within the office. There were a few sort of leading people, but the idea was to bring all those people together under one forum and help to educate internally and externally within the architecture realm. So we've established, there's different members across the different studios. We all come together once a month and have our meetings, etc. We've got our mission statement. That was the first thing we did. We said, all right, we've got to be very clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If we just come together to talk about sustainability, it's going to be fun, but it probably won't lead to any action. So we set ourselves some tasks about, as I said, education internally and externally, developing sustainability programs within Sharley, increasing our knowledge, increasing a sustainable approach, both in personal life and professional lives as well. So we recognize that if you don't do it because you believe in it yourself, if you're not connected to it on a personal level, it's really hard to sell it to your clients. It becomes greenwash in effect. If you're doing it because you love it and you live it, then it's very different. People respond differently to it, and obviously you're a lot more passionate and invested in it. And then we want to educate and encourage our clients and our colleagues to come on this journey with us. And again, we recognize that if we work with people that are not invested in it themselves, they're not as likely to, aspire to great results or to any real change. And the pretty graphics on the side are, you know, might look a bit generic, but that's our mission statement for the office. That's the key principles that Sharley stands for. So, you know, I put sustainability in the middle, not necessarily there, but all the other things sort of come neatly around it, like trust, insight, passion, imagination, innovation, collaboration, and communication. So they're all things that sort of bring Sharley together, things that we stand for. Now, this is a bit dense, so I'll try and unpack it. The NSF process, the way we work within Sharley, we have a yellow book or design review process that we run for every project. And that's this little guy up here. We actually embedded some of the NSF requirements or aspirations into that process. So projects get reviewed with that sustainability lens on. We also use something called Team Gantt as a project management tool, so for building programs for projects. And we've embedded the sustainability measures into that, so that when you run through a project, this is effectively our QA list. So when you run through a project, you build your program, it sort of highlights to you that there are tasks that you need to do around establishing your sustainability targets for the project, confirming that they are being achieved, etc. Then we have Dave, which is our intranet. It's our internal communication tool. We've got our own page on there, and we use that for communication. We also have a product supplier database, and what we've done is we've neatly added another column that actually tells us what are the sustainability ratings of this product. So to give you an example, as Cary said, we love using the Living Building Challenge as a framework for working through projects. Whether the clients use it for certification or not is almost immaterial to us. It's just a really good framework. And part of the Living Building Challenge talks about materials and having healthy materials. And the way they ascertain that is through a certification program called Declare. So Declare is a bit like GECA, I suppose, and other certification programs, but it's a lot more intensive and a lot more transparent. It talks about the product life cycle, the embodied energy, transportation, and the end of life of products as well. So there's a lot more information there that is, you know, above and beyond normal certification programs. So any product that has Declare label gets the highest rating for us, and we plugged it into our template. This template is actually linked back to our Revit, so that when you document a project, by default, the products that are pre-populated here are sustainable. And then if you want to choose a product that is less sustainable or is not part of this list, you know, it's your choice. You can still do it, but you have to you have to actively make that selection, actively make that choice. So we're biasing our selections towards more sustainable materials. And we will leave it at that. And then engagement, oops, that's kind of crops, didn't realize that. Our engagement is far and wide. So we've got internal design reviews, as I said, within the studio. We've got affiliations with different universities across the country. We do talks and things within those universities. I recently just did I was creative director for the, what's it called? Super Studio. Thank you. Gold star to you, my friend. You know what I do. Yes. That was really good fun and very educational for me, hopefully as well as for the students. We do guest speaking, kind of like this event, for example. We have a national newsletter that we run. We do volunteer work. We try and actively make a difference within our community and you know, harvest the power of 200 architects for tree planting or whatever, talking at schools, whatever it is that we can do to make a difference. And then that sounds really bad now that I read it, office interventions. What I meant was, what we actually do is we educate ourselves and our peers, and we, you know, we look at what's happening within our offices and go, hey, we can do this better. Or, you know, I do this at home. Can I do this in the office as well? And just try and bring that knowledge across from our personal lives into our professional lives, but also across the different studios as well. So then went through all that and went, oh, actually, we're already doing a fair bit, but felt that we actually needed to commit to a sustainability action plan. And our approach is a bit more corporate than yourselves. We actually got a template from, and now the name escapes me, the City Switch. Thank you, Ken. So inspirational, my friend. The City Switch program, if you're not aware of it, trying to encourage more energy efficiency within office buildings. They do it in a number of different ways. I won't get into that now, but my good friends in City Switch were kind enough to share their template with me, and I'm happy to share it with anyone who's interested as well. It's got very clear structure, and I will run through it with you now, and you can sort of pick and choose how you adapt it to your own needs. So the first thing you do is you do your executive summary. It's a bit of a no-brainer, explain very high level what you're trying to achieve. The second thing you do is a summary of sustainability in your organization, what you're already doing currently, what are your goals, what's your vision, etc. And we used our vision statements and images, and we also spoke about regenerative design, which is a goal that we set to ourselves and we like to share with our clients and encourage them to choose to do more. So just to explain very, very quickly a huge topic, to summarize it very, very briefly. Sustainability is about reducing the harmful impact that we have in what we do as designers. Regenerative design is about actively doing good through every act of design. That is an oversimplification, massively oversimplified explanation, but we'll leave it at that for now. And if you're interested in more, my favorite topic in the world, I can talk about it all day. But we have got it as part of our aspirations in the SAP that we've put together. So then we went through a bit of an introduction and background as to who we are as an organization, how we see our role within the built environment in terms of sustainability and how we're hoping to achieve it. And then we've highlighted the purpose of the SAP, what's the direction that we're hoping to take, what's the framework, what's the plan for action. We've set up timeframes of how we're going to move through the SAP, and we've committed to delivery of set goals. So it's very, very important to have clear goals that you set to yourselves. And Cary spoke very eloquently about their goals, and most of it is around carbon emissions and things like that, but a lot of it is about engagement and education too. So if you've got clear goals that you can articulate to yourselves, it'll be easy for you to track and easy for you to report and be very transparent about it. And then outline of the current. Ooh, okay, let's just restart. Okay. The computer says no. Just restarting randomly. That's okay. You can keep talking without it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Awkward. Yeah,
I just improvise.
Just improvise. Just improvise.
Pretend that I remember the presentation. So what's I can visually keep talking. It's okay. We're nearly there. 50% there. It's okay. We'll keep going. So then what we've done is we've set ourselves very clear goals, and we broke them up into 3 key areas: environmental, social, and economic. Bit of a no-brainer. And we are tracking them, or we're measuring them compared to the United Nations SDGs. So is everyone familiar with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals? Do I need to explain what that is? I will anyway. So the United Nations established 17 goals for 17 goals for sustainable development. I can't remember them off the top of my head without the slides, but let me try a few of them. There are goals around eradicating poverty, healthy population, equity, access to healthy, clean water for all, reducing world hunger or eradicating world hunger. They're very high aspirations, they're very big goals, and clearly as architects, we're quite limited in what we can achieve. Thank you, Priscilla. Yeah, someone's well prepared, has done her homework. Thank you. Yeah, education is key, life and environment. I can't see them all without my glasses. Climate action is one of them you'd be happy to know. And you'd think every task that we set to ourselves should be measured against it, but we were kind of trying to be a bit more broad about it and not put everything under climate, but just pick other things as well that we can potentially address. So the way the spreadsheet works is we've got a task, we've got our KPI, we allocated that task to a person or a sub-organization within Sharley. We set some timeframes that we want to achieve this within, and then we measure we track how we're actually performing. So it's really easy for us to see what we are hoping to achieve or what we're committed to achieve, how we're actually tracking with it, and be very transparent in our reporting. And I think that's the key thing that we should be doing with our sustainability action plans, is be really transparent in our reporting so that people internal and external to the organization can share that knowledge and be responsible to actually deliver on our commitments. I mean, it's all well and good to set tasks and aspirations, but this is the way to actually keep accountable and keep tracking that performance and that accountability. So I'll probably leave it at that because it's a bit hard to see it without the presentation, but I think I covered everything. Thank you. Was this the first question? Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So Yaara, just obviously Living Building Challenge is a great benchmark. Can you maybe just, I mean, we've had personal experience too with proposing and trying. It's really hard to get it adopted by some people and the implementation. So you've probably got some first-hand knowledge as to it's okay to specify something, but we've all probably been through it where the builder's like, oh no, mate, can't get that, can't use that, got to use this. And then it's a matter of how we mitigate the damage by that.
It's sort of two questions that you asked there, Cary, but yeah, I'll try and answer both. I'll start with the materials one because that's an easy one. With the LBC, if you are committed to it, there's not much wiggle room. So any substitution that you want to make has to be one that is compliant. And there's different measures that you can take. So if we look at Scotch College, which is the project we're currently doing that is undergoing certification, we're using core certification for that one. So Living Building Challenge has different entry points, I guess. Core is the most basic compliance that you can get. It still requires compliance with 10 imperatives of the Living Building Challenge. Then you have petal certification, which requires some of the core elements plus a couple of the petal imperatives. And then there's the full certification, which is 22 imperatives, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, over the 7 petals. So there's a whole bunch of different levels that you can engage with, but for Scotch, we're doing core. And even with that, which is like the entry level for LBC, it's still quite restricted. So if the builders did want to have a substitute, and they've tried it a few times, we just said to them, look, as long as it complies with either the red list or has a declare label or is locally manufactured or has FSC, so that depending on the material, it had to meet certain sets of requirements. And in terms of getting the LBC, though it's not something that we're doing as part of the SAP, it is something that we're doing as part of the NSF, and what we're doing as part of the Regen Design Committee for the AIA. We are definitely promoting regenerative design as the best option to our clients, but we do offer, like you were saying, there's different levels of service. So the entry level for service is still best practice. Above that, if a client wants to engage in some form of certification, we can happily do that. And then the highest form of sustainability for us is regenerative design, which is not sustainability, it's regenerative design. And it is becoming easier to have these conversations because people are more aware of it. And, you know, just having at least one project under our belt to say, hey, this is Living Building Challenge. This is a building that is going through it. You can see it. And Carmen, thank you for your support on that one. Appreciate it. Carmen's helping us go through the certification now, and massive job. Thank you. But just having that building that you can reference back to your clients and say, hey, we are doing this. We know that it can work. It's a real thing, and it does actually make a big difference. It makes all the difference.
It's probably a really basic question that maybe everybody else knows the answer to, but when you say you've already got a regenerative design project under your belt, what are the main things that define it as regenerative design?
As I said, the big definition for regenerative design is to have a positive impact in every act of design. So even though the client only committed to core certification, when we went through the design process, we used the full LBC as our framework, and we worked through the requirements of the Living Building Challenge as if we're going through full certification. Now, we didn't meet, or there's 86, if you break down the imperatives, the 22 imperatives, there's 86 things that you need to measure or achieve. We didn't meet all 86 of them, but we did use it as a measuring stick, and we did achieve a fair bit more than we would have in a normal project. And by taking the client on board and taking them on the journey early on and having that commitment early on just meant that we could achieve more than we could have if we didn't have that framework to measure ourselves against. So we could say to the client, you know, we agreed that the LBC is good. Yeah, yes. We know that we're aspiring to comply with it as much as we can. Yes. Therefore, we should be looking at biodiversity on site, increasing it, and using native flora and fauna as much as possible, And we should do a biodiversity survey on the site to ascertain what's the impact of our project, etc. We should aim for, the LBC, the core certification only requires us to have 50% reduction in energy, but the client was actually looking at what is the full requirement for the LBC, and that is to produce 105% of the building's energy use on site through sustainable measures. So solar panels or wind or what have you. And they actually ended up covering the entire facility in solar panels. It's phenomenal. Like the whole roof is going to be covered in solar panels. And they actually, it encouraged them to consider what they're doing across the entire campus and review the entire campus's energy consumption and energy plan. And, you know, so the reach of this project is beyond just itself. It goes towards educating the school community and hopefully anyone that would come into the building as well. And part of what we need to do is actually education. So we need to have plaques or screens or whatever that communicate what we're doing with the building and open it up for anyone to engage with. As I said, I can talk about this all day.
Gentleman at the back.
I was just going to ask, how have you both gone with staff engagement and buy-in? How do you try and
Loaded comment from my senior staff member. Tane's adequately qualified to ask questions, being the chair of the Architects Award and on the sustainability jury before with Yaara. So I think everyone's, well, I guess I look at it with green eyes probably, but everyone's, I think, realises the situation things are in. Everyone realises that a healthier, better environment is a better place to be in. So, and I think people, if they're given the tools to measure things, can make those decisions really well and implement them. But it is about advocacy and communicating to clients and knowing what we're doing, I guess, to move that through. But I mean, like I said, from a personal point of view, our office, I guess, has been doing things for a long time. It's just quantifying them and making clients aware of those things and really pushing them out of the comfort zone across the line to try and give them the opportunity to make good decisions, I guess. So yeah, but I mean, you've got more cats to herd than we have.
I do, and it's probably more of a mixed bag for us. So, having 200 people in the practice means that there's different levels of engagement. I won't sugarcoat it. Some people are just not interested, and that's okay. Like out of 200 people, if 5, 10, 20 people are not interested, that's okay. You don't have to have 100% engagement. What's important for us is that we do have massive engagement at management level. There's a huge push from management to see these things happen and take off, and that is fantastic. That makes a huge difference. Part of it is corporate responsibility. I mean, we're all aware of it. We all know that we have that responsibility. And part of it is just genuine personal passion. And as I said, if you have that personal passion, it shows and it makes a huge difference and people respond to it.
And I guess from both Yaara and I are involved with the Institute of Architects Regenerative Design Committee, which is no longer the Sustainable Committee. And I guess what we're advocating is to try and get that on the agenda. Like, I mean, every architectural awarded building should have a mandated regenerative or sustainable category to it. And I know through feedback, residential categories have just been full of substantially large houses a lot lately and things like that. So it's easy to take the high mile road because we've all got clients and we've all got our own businesses to run. But it's interesting how you can lever things against particular clients probably to get results, if they're given the opportunity. So yeah, I think we just need to keep it out there and raise the bar, I guess. And I'm sure everyone here is capable of doing that. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, thank you for sharing. It's amazing experience. And I was wondering, when you started your sustainability action plan, did you start it with big projects that have like a huge budget, but they're more complex? Or did you start it with something smaller that is more manageable?
So for us, there's two things here. There's the NSF and there's the SAP. NSF, National Sustainability Forum, is a committee within Sharley that is in charge of promoting sustainability and engaging with it and everything. And we're trying to make sure that every project has engagement with sustainability. And that's one thing. The Sustainability Action Plan is a corporate document that will be available online. The Board of Directors voted on it and approved the draft, getting it through the final steps of approval, and then it will be readily available on our website and be part of our reporting, like corporate reporting. So they're sort of two separate things. The SAP is reporting on our performance. The NSF is promoting sustainability within the practice and within projects. So they're separate things. They're working towards the same cause, but one is like a corporate document and the other one is an internal organization, I guess.
We've got a range of projects, and I guess sustainable is embedded in the design approach to those. So we're in the process now of really checklisting all that stuff retrospectively to grade some of those projects and use that knowledge with some other projects that are starting at sort of ground zero and moving forward. So yeah, I think you can start with any project. It doesn't really matter what the scale of it. They've all got those aspects that got to be embedded in them. So I don't think if you've got a system or a checklist, yeah, sure, the scale of the project makes a difference and the resources you have to put to it, but the process remains the same. So yeah, no one should be afraid of that, I don't think.
That actually kind of ties into my question. I think, Cary, you mentioned about like calculating carbon footprint of the like office, and then Yaara yourself on like creating a sustainability action plan. And I believe like there's quite a bit of like admin and like planning and trying to measure things before actually some type of like action occurring from it. So my question is more of like, in how do you scale the time frame for one, like to also have like a good path forward, but not use too much action for just like ideas and like plans that might actually not create like, let's say impact of like using solar panels to like installing those solar panels directly. So that's like one of my questions, the time frame. And the other one is like from your experience, for example, what kind of actions do create like more of a benefit in like quick benefits that won't take a lot of effort for people to like overhead or like manage. So yeah, thank you.
So again, there's two things at play here. We kind of separate projects from the SAP, but not really. Let me explain. So the Sustainability Action Plan that we wrote has things in it like, we are committed to be carbon neutral practice by, I can't remember the time frame I've put in there, 2030, I think. So our office in Perth is undergoing a carbon neutral certification at the moment. Next will be the office in Adelaide, etc. So we'll roll it out across the 6 offices. So that's one action within the Sustainability Action Plan. Another action that we have there is to improve our policy around equity, gender equity, and I can't remember what, for example. And then we've given a time frame around that. There's another action about advocating for healthy materials within buildings and sourcing responsible materials and ensuring that we work with, people in the industry that have the same ethos as we do. And I'm looking at you, Priscilla. So things like that are embedded in the SAP. But then when it comes to actual project work, what we do with our clients, it sort of falls under these things, because the Sustainability Action, the SAP calls for us to advocate and promote and do all these things. But it's not too prescriptive about projects. It doesn't say, we will ensure that every project has 105% energy generated. It's not that prescriptive. It does say, we will encourage our clients to use regenerative design. So when we encourage our clients to use regenerative design, we educate them about what does that mean? What can they do? Do they want to use the LBC framework, or do they want to do something else? Are they just interested in biophilia? And that's okay. Is biomimicry their thing? That's okay. So there's so many ways to engage with it, and you just have to tailor it to the client and to their aspirations. Now, we're just working on a project now, and I won't give too much away, but we're working on trying to figure out what is their ESD, what's the right ESD strategy for this project. Luckily, this client is progressive enough to have a sustainability action plan. So we're mapping our ESD strategy based on their SAP, which is really handy, because they're like 10 steps ahead already. They actually know what they want to achieve as a business. So we can come back to them and say, all right, you said that as a business, you want to achieve zero waste, for example, through your operations as a business, which means if we align ourselves with it, then as designers, we should design something that promotes zero waste as well. Yeah, it just makes sense. They already want to do it. So if you have a clear understanding of what your client is trying to achieve, you can work with them towards the same goals. It's probably the easiest way to actually get action.
So I'm Amanda, as you can see, from Wax Design. So being a landscape architecture practice, it's a little bit easier to have the environment at the forefront of everything that you do on a daily basis. So I feel very grateful for that. But I'm also here to confess that the whole sustainability action plan is a complete work in progress for us. We're nowhere near along or as formalized as either Yaara or Cary are. But I think, it's the honest conversation that I want to have with you today, and just to share how we're going about developing that and what stages and where we feel our quick wins are and what we're working towards. So the two things that we've been focusing on that I wanted to share with you was how we've used becoming a carbon neutral company this year to help measure our progress. And then about how we consider sustainability not just to be about our work, but it's about the people and our company. And if we don't look after them, then there is no wax, and then I can't do good work moving forward. So as I said, I'm a tree hugger. And that makes being sustainable and environmentally considerate an imperative about why I go to work. So this is a great project. It's down at Flinders University. We've worked with our First Nations people and provided them with their first ever yarning circle. This has been on their wrap and been a key outcome for about 10, 15 years. They've been wanting one of these. Finally, we've been able to give them one. But we had to really consider the land and the site and create them a space that connected them to country and to their land, and most importantly, respected the land on which this installation was built. We've got resident koalas. We've got lizards and skinks that run over this land. It's on the side of a cliff. It's really a challenging site. We had to provide DDA access to consider inclusion. So it was a very touch lightly program and project. So we built everything up and we built it on lightweight structures. The land form is untouched underneath. We've kept the vegetation underneath the platforms. The water runs across the site. We haven't changed the stormwater. We've kept all the trees. We've planted more Indigenous plants to create that biodiversity. So whilst it was a very challenging site and we had to work really, really hard to come up with the outcomes that were needed for our clients, and the land was the imperative driver behind the design process. And that was what was at the forefront of our mind with each decision that we made. And we had a receptive client who was already on board, so we didn't have to encourage them. We were able to work collaboratively together. So this is what we can achieve when we can consider what we're working with, Mother Earth, who's actually way more smarter than we are. So as I said, we're really excited. We've finally become carbon neutral. We're a practice of 7. So we're not massive, but we work together over 18 months and we utilise our very awesome friends upstairs at D Squared and Climate Active to support us through that process. And we now have a tool. We owe 20 carbon credits for 2021 for the emissions that our company has created. And so now we have a strategy moving forward. Every year, we want to reduce how much we're having to buy to offset the emissions that we're creating. And obviously there's a raft of tools that we're looking at on an annual basis about how we can become more efficient and more considerate in the way we run our company and the energy that we consume to do our work. There's also, it was already mentioned before, there's great partners out there, City Switch. We were able to also partner with the people in our building, D Squared, and put some solar panels on the roof together. So how is it that you can be collaborative in your joint ventures and encourage others to do, invest in outcomes that are going to benefit just more than you? So we've now got a tool to measure how we can then become more sustainable within our company and running our company. So that's excellent. And we can then evaluate that each year. But more importantly, everyone who's at work is aware of what the imperatives are. So they're also considering that every time they put the rubbish out, or did they put the coffee grinds in the green compost, they know it's being measured. So at the end of the year, and we go, Jesus, where did all this plastic come from? Who's putting all the plastic in here? We're supposed to be getting better at this. We're working on it as a team, but it's also really transparent as well. So that could be a really easy, quick win that you can then engage people that do this all the time to help you through that process. You don't have to do it alone. The other thing I wanted to talk to you was about how we're looking after each other in our workplace. And we think that this is probably a really important part of your sustainability action plan is, are you fit and well enough to go to work today? And is your team on board with that? Are they capable of going through that day and making the best decisions for themselves and for your clients and for the people that they work with, and most importantly, for the planet? So 2 years ago, we had a bit of a chat and had a decision-making process about how we could improve our well-being as individuals. And we decided to trial a 4-day working week at WAX. So we've been doing that successfully for 2 years now. And we have been able to measure the success and also obviously the compromises and potentially the failures as well. But we have achieved now for 2 years a 35-hour working week on 4 days a week. We all have Friday off. We all get a 3-day weekend. And to do that, we've actually worked out that we can maintain the same profit and the same turnover and the same workflow. It turns out that maybe on Friday afternoons we weren't working as efficiently as we thought we were, and we should have gone home. So we're working more smarter, we're being more efficient. We know that if we get the work done, we can go home and have Friday off. And we also have reduced staff sickness and absenteeism and personal time requirements. We're all less stressed and we're all much, much happier. And we also have more time to do those things that remind us that the work that we're doing is really important. So I manage my beehive and I get out in the veggie garden and I take the dog for a walk and I actually connect myself to my place and try and look after myself at the same time. And we've talked to our staff about it. No one wants to go back to a 5-day working week. So I suppose, you know, through these networks, we can also support each other in measuring our environmental impact, but also our social impact, our cultural impact as well. So as I mentioned, it's a work in progress for us. And what we're really trying to do is to encourage sustainability in others. And I understand that being a landscape architect, those opportunities do come to us a little bit more easily. But how can I partner with everybody else in the room and work collaboratively together on projects that champion good work, that champion the environment and all your sustainability action plans? How can we work together to make this easier? And how do we continue to develop those project precedents that just demonstrate these positive outcomes and encourage others that it doesn't have to be really difficult, that we can achieve these things easily and together. So this is probably one of my favorite wins. There were 5 mature white cedar trees next door to the Pembroke Middle School project that we really enjoyed collaborating on with GGA. These trees got slated for removal, I can't remember how many times, because they were so close to the building. It was going to be too difficult to work in their tree canopies. So we got through planning and we got through the architecture and we got through the engineering because they're really close to the footings and, you know, and the water and everything else. All those reasons why those trees should come out, because the building needs to take up this footprint to make it functional for the client. So we got through all those benchmarks and the trees were still in. It's like, awesome, okay. And then we had to talk with the builders. No, those trees have got to come out. They're in the crane swing circle. I've got no work site. The trees have got to come out. So at each process through that project, I can't remember how many times we had to talk about why we needed to keep the trees. And they are still standing. And so I look at them and they bring me so much joy because they're way older than me. And now they're sort of living more symbiotically with this new architecture that sits next to them. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
When I was talking to Cary about setting up this event, we thought it would be really great to kind of expand the discourse. So not necessarily just architecture businesses, but of course also landscape and also engineering. As we know, there's a declare movement for all types of professions. If you haven't gone onto your own professional declare movement, please do. But yes, there is Engineers Declare, and Mott Macdonald is a signatory of that. But the other aspect of this is knowing that this company that I am currently working for and adding to their sustainability strategy is enormous. So again, a diversity of scale. So I'll just go through Mott Macdonald's own carbon neutral and net zero journey. So you all can kind of get a taste of what a global company is doing. And at the same time, what might be some very strong similarities that a global organization will do to even a local organization. So just a little bit of a, you got to have the corporate suit, right? So it's like a little bit of corporate plug. What does Mott Macdonald do? It basically engineers everything under the sun. So the simplest way I could put it. But it's quite interesting, the diversity of the input and expertise that Mott Macdonald actually has. And it crosses strategy. So that could also be planning, environmental regulation, project management, Built environment, that's the sector that I work in. That's my passion, and our buildings and precincts. But also energy and water infrastructure. So how do we actually rehabilitate water courses, but also how do we transport water, the pipes and all that kind of stuff. Also energy, how do we rethink what our energy system actually is. Transport, everything from the north-south corridor to rail lines in Melbourne and Sydney and everything like that. But interestingly, because we acknowledge, there's acknowledgement that the built environment enables so many different outcomes, right? So that has actually, especially through engaging with clients around strategy, as well as how does that link into their own corporate agenda potentially, or even communities agenda. A lot of what has stemmed out of that is a lot of international development for communities, as well as education. So it's quite a varied organization in terms of what the capabilities actually are. And this is the footprint of this global organization. It's kind of insane to think you're part of a engineering firm that spans the globe, has multi-thousands of employees. And I assure you, I'm not trying to put this slide up here to brag about Mott Macdonald. I actually think it's very helpful to put this up here because what Mott Macdonald has done is saying, we're just going to become carbon neutral all together, all at once. So yes, early investigations might have been based in UK and Europe. However, when the direction went for, okay, we need to make sure we're taking this seriously. We need to get our own house in order. We're going to be carbon neutral. That spurred globally, which meant all offices all across the globe had to get their house in order and really get on with the program. So that kind of goes to what Yaara was also mentioning around making sure that leadership is on board, can move things very, very quickly. And it doesn't matter if you're a global company or you are a small firm in Adelaide. You need to have leaders that will actually say, this is part of our values and this is where we're going. And alongside this has Mott Macdonald making a whole bunch of commitments that, yes, it does align from a business corporate alignment in the corporate social responsibility agenda. But it's incredible around how this permeates all the way down. Once again, leadership, making commitments to reducing emissions, being very active in developing standards across infrastructure, especially in Australia and the UK. Making sure that there's a lot of programs internally in the organization to make sure that it highlights how important it is for us in every project to think about how do we make a impact on sustainability, especially measurable outcomes, thinking about climate change. And aligning ourselves with industry leaders. And on side of that, it's also not only realizing that there's a big opportunity, but there's a big impetus to make sure that we are helping clients along the way. So allowing these discussions around how are you getting your house in order? Can we actually help you get your house in order? And not only that strategy, but through digital tools that our engineers actually develop, how can we actually make you see what your impact is? So, and almost automate it. Because if you, and I'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but if you can kind of think about, especially when you're looking to measure what your environmental impact is in carbon, if you can kind of think, especially those that are business leaders, you're doing almost weekly or monthly business accounting. You got to make sure your books check out. And if you're on there regularly, then you can actually have a really good handle on where the incomings, outgoings, what's really hurting the business, what's making the business thrive. It's the same thing with carbon accounting. It just creates a new lens, and you actually have to think about it just as you think about business. But outside of that, making sure that there's an excellence in how we approach design, and making sure that we align as a signatory of the World Green Building Council's net zero carbon building commitment, and as well as supporting Infrastructure Sustainability Council of Australia with the development of their tools, and again, helping set precedents and standards. So again, as I mentioned, as a global organization, became carbon neutral in 2020. The original plan was 2022, but again, leadership said, let's just get this done now. That becomes the chain reaction. And now, because the organization has been able to achieve carbon neutrality, the plan to become net zero is now in effect and being developed. And yes, I will answer your question. And yes, I will, because I have a slide on that. And of course, beyond making sure that that's not the end goal. It's, again, as everyone before me has said, you set this, you create these action plans and these net zero plans to make sure that you're constantly reevaluating how your organization goes about this and how can you continue to make better. So in a weird way, not in a weird way, it's actually intentional to make sure that you are doing constant self-reflection. And from a global standpoint that aligns with international like ISO standards, the carbon neutral approach is to make sure that you're measuring scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Now, as a global organization, one thing that we're very cognizant of is that we need to get a lot more granular, but this is where we're starting. So scope 1 emissions is anything that's a direct fossil fuel creation, carbon emitting. Scope 2 is from things that you're still consuming, but the carbon impact is further fields, such as electricity. And scope 3 is everything else from your supply chain. And when you look at your scope 3, you have to really think about how much impact can we actually get across through our supply chain decisions. So this has been the journey globally since 2012 for Mott Macdonald. Again, you got to start by measuring what's happening. You get the baseline. They started measuring mostly in Europe in 2012. But as you're going through 2020, even though you're adding a lot more kind of like offices, you can see there's a downward trend, mainly because by measuring that, you're actually being able to see hotspots. Okay, we got to do something about that. We got to do something about that. And hence why by 2018, you're able to make science-based reduction targets, right? So essentially, just for Australia's standpoint, where all the emissions have been collected very rigorously since 2018, you can see that you take the measurement, we are actually able to quantify scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. And then from there, we're able to set a baseline that we're actually gunning for. And interestingly, you did that almost in year 1 because you identified how you're going to do that. And that was only a 25% reduction target. Now we can actually reset that and say, we want to have a further reduction target off of maybe 2019 of like a 40%, 50%. Now, of course, we all know what happened in 2020, going into 2021. As Cary also pointed out, one of the big things, especially in consulting of an organization of this size, is a lot of travel. So whilst if you are a very locally focused organization, it might be more of like your office electricity, water use, waste. For for organizations that travel a lot, you really have to think creatively about your travel emissions. So with all this data, and of course, engineers love the data, what has that been able to spark on from a policy and strategy standpoint? Yes, group carbon action plan, and that aligns with the net zero commitment by 2040. Again, getting your carbon emissions is almost like accounting. So in terms of getting your expense claims, you have an expense code for travel and by carbon. So then that automatically gets logged into the systems. Environmental policies, and this aligns with our carbon accounting to make sure that we streamline it, automate it, and being able to see our emissions live as they kind of go along. Fund contributions to climate science. So again, industry partnerships are really, really strong, but also being able to leverage just all the expertise that Mott Macdonald has on offer to be able to make sure that it helps with decision-making. We've talked about green building rating objectives, making sure we're committed to walking the walk. There's a bit more around remote working and different working structures. These LEPP, which is local environment practice policies, making sure that each location is able to identify what do we do to help progress and reduce our organizational carbon footprint. And one of the last things I want to touch on in terms of policies is a big organization. We have a lot of training and also a lot of onboarding and also continued professional development. So Mott Macdonald is actually investing in an internal climate change academy. So part of that is even when I joined Mott Macdonald, part of the induction was Mott Macdonald's commitment to climate change. What is climate change? How do we actually affect it through our work? And this climate change academy is meant to put that on steroids and be able to really identify so many opportunities that we have in terms of reducing our environmental impact, because we do a lot of impactful built environment projects as well as infrastructure. And this is where we have a conversation around offsetting emissions. Mott Macdonald was actually helping get this project off the ground in terms of a carbon abatement project in Indonesia, in Sumatra. Lots of different aspects of it, not just the carbon abatement, but a lot of the social impact. And of course, the main thing here is, yes, you can get offsets that are about just carbon abatement. So you can invest in wind farms, solar farms in different kind of like areas, or areas that reduce gas use. But I guess the focus here is on active carbon abatement. So that's through the creation of helping evolve ecologies. Now, this is where we get into zero carbon, like carbon neutral and net zero. So if you can kind of see that carbon neutral is about getting you to zero and thinking about how do you actually make those reductions, but you actually acknowledge that you have still a bit of a footprint and you purchase offsets. So then that's going to a third party. Net zero is actually, again, the process is interlinked. So you still want to figure out how are we going, you set your benchmarks, how are we going to continuously improve to make sure that we continue to get our emissions down, down, down. And then whilst you're getting closer to that point where you're really reducing your emissions, you start to invest directly into projects that do carbon abatement. So that means ownership potentially in solar farms. It means directly investing in ecological restoration projects, because that means you have direct skin in the game of facilitating these projects rather than you just saying, oh, well, we'll shift around on our carbon credits whenever we want. So this links back to the Sumatra project, is that we're already building those relationships so we can make sure that at this moment, yes, it's about getting that project off the ground, sustain it, offsets, and then make sure that there's a commitment to keep it going in perpetuity. So that's that on there. I'm pretty sure I went over time after I've kept everyone to time. So we do have some time for questions, but I'll have Amanda come back up, and Cary, Yaara, if you want to come back up. We'll have a yarn for a little bit longer, and we'll see where the conversation goes. Yes, you may. The sustainability action plan is part of the carbon neutral plan. Thank you. So
Tell me more.
essentially, because it's a strategy for the organization, and it really sets the precedent around what decisions are actually being made. Again, being able to do the research and quantify all those emissions, that becomes like the baseline. Making sure that's in line with verifiable standards. So might have to do a little bit of a U, but at least that helps making sure that we are aligned with other organizations that want to go along with this. That's why it's actually very important to make sure that you are accounting by some kind of standard, because you might be making up your own game while others are keeping toward not really a regulated kind of like aspect, but we're playing the same game at least, so it's fair. And part of that action plan, again, is to be able to see where it's going, be able to take note and improve on it. What else can we do? And as I mentioned, our scope 3 emissions will probably become better monitored, as well as various items will kind of like grow. And there's like, what else are we going to make sure that we're making ourselves accountable?
I have lots more questions, but
Any questions from the floor?
like we practiced.
Yeah. I took notes. Thank you, Yaara. Just firstly, like to thank you all. I've heard so much of this before, but there's always new and refreshing ideas, and we can always question ourselves and take more things on board. It's always nice to get a lot of like-minded people in the same room and throw ideas around. I'd really like to know what your thoughts are on sharing that information with people that aren't trying to source it, not necessarily telling people what they should be doing, but how do we get that information out there, share it with people so they can want to learn more? Do you see any government initiatives, local government initiatives? City Switch is a great one. I'm aware of that.
I have a quick answer.
Yeah.
The Adelaide Sustainable Building. Wait, no, we're not.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was too easy. No, I'm just kidding. Y'all can answer that.
So you're right, it is something that should be more centralized and legislated and embedded. There are different bodies, different organizations moving towards the same direction. I guess my personal frustration is being across different committees and different organizations, etc. I can sort of see that everyone wants to head in the same direction, but everyone's going about it in a slightly different way and working in silos. And that is something that I find incredibly frustrating. So by having these conversations, it's exactly how we break down these silos. And by having people that are happy to work across various organizations and just keep the conversation open and honest, that's how you do it. And obviously transparency is key. Like I said, if you don't actually publish stuff and put it out there and share it with people, you might as well not be doing it. If a tree falls in the forest. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add a little bit there, so one thing that I'm actually very happy about is that now action on climate change is sometimes in weird ways not a environmental question anymore. It's whether or not a business wants to survive. So what I mean by that is, one, a lot of organizations are getting their act together in terms of measuring their carbon impact because they will no longer get investment from shareholders, from superannuation. That movement's already kind of happening. And I know, like, y'all might be hearing the acronym ESG. That's hitting a lot of investment portfolios very hard because yes, it is still in its infancy, but however, it's starting to set a standard of where people put their money, and especially when climate change is in the question. The other aspect is if you, the other part of business survival around sustainable action plans or showcasing you are carbon neutral or you're taking in considerations your carbon impact and setting science-based targets, whether you're a global organization or once again, a small Adelaide firm, you might be taken off tendered lists because that might be a scoring criteria. And as even materials specifiers, even architects are making these checklists. And if you don't actually showcase a level of transparency, if you're not a carbon neutral product, you're in a very bad spot because now embodied energy is being calculated and will be calculated more regularly into the future. So again, I just want to stress this not by being like, haha, gotcha. The sustainability folks gotcha now. It's just, I'm just trying to, and I try to be as more eloquent and clear with a lot of government and corporate clients is if you don't get your act together now, you are really putting your own business in jeopardy. Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, how are you finding that with the government client? And there seems to be the focus on getting the budget to the lowest line and the time frame to be as quick as possible. How do you get that buy-in from the client? And how are you finding that at the moment?
Well, so currently we're getting local government tenders that are coming out, and part of the assessment criteria that we've got to fill out is what is our sustainability ethos, our action plan? What are we doing as a company? And we have to now demonstrate that on a tender. So if I can sort of list out everything that we are currently doing and we go into their matrix and I score quite high on that, but maybe lower on something else, I'm ahead of game. So it's, you know, it's even coming through from our perspective at a local government level and the expectation when I'm filling in a standard tender. That was one thing that I was really struggling with when I was putting the presentation together, is we live and breathe this all day, every day, but then I have to work collaboratively on an outcome to get that project from what the vision was to the end. And how does sustainability stay as a measure of success from the beginning all the way through to the end when you go through the value management stage and then every other, you know, redactive process that the project has to get through to get constructed. And we struggle with that. So if somebody else has got a better answer, because we don't.
I actually had a really good conversation about this with Stephen Choi when we were doing a workshop around regenerative design. So if you were in the workshop, my apologies, but someone asked Stephen about the Brickworks project and said, well, how much did it cost to make it sustainable, to have the living building challenge? And Stephen said, well, I don't know, because we didn't do it as a separate thing. It's embedded in the project. If you design a building that has all these things built into it, it's not going to get VM'd because you can't VM these things out without actually changing the design of the building. So rather than designing a building and then sticking on solar panels and doing things to it to make it sustainable, you design a holistically sustainable, regenerative, even better building. There's no way it can be VM'd out. The scope can be reduced, other things can be tweaked and changed and whatever, but the actual sustainable or regenerative aspects of it are embedded and cannot be taken out independently.
And just to add from a recent workshop that we've carried out actually with Green Industries SA. It was actually all around the circular economy in the built environment. And I'm not really disclosing too much of what happened, but a key thing that actually did come up was around project controls. So you actually, it is a situation where, yes, there's plenty of aspects where we're swimming upstream. And that the people that are doing the project management also need to understand they cannot waver off of some of this criteria. Now, in the residential kind of aspect, sometimes that can really be tough because it might be to the client's budget and that's all and everything. So you got to be really creative on that. But again, working mostly in commercial, institutional, corporate level projects in my current role, I really just say, like, what is your corporate sustainability plan? And that has allowed me to make sure there's like, are we checking with your sustainability manager that this is okay, that you're about to wipe this off and we're about to lose this kind of impact? Or, you know, it's like, and it's incredible how much that quickly changes things. So even if it's a government project and government is actually saying, we're going to get our own house in order, we are doing our measurements. Soon they'll be requiring probably embodied energy measurements as well, outside of operational energy impact. And then you just have to say, like, what is the, like, even government can be looked at as like a corporate entity, right? At sometimes, right? Yeah. Should I actually say that? Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, if you're going to meet that, you cannot waver off of this. It's like, it's not about what's good, like what's nice to have in here. It's like, I'm not even talking to you about that anymore. It's like, you signed up to project manage this, to hit these KPIs, this, and this. And you're supposed to hold us all accountable for that brief, but now I'm reversing that on you. Now, I know that sounds a little bit aggressive, but I'm just trying to illustrate how much more a sustainability consultant can be quite forward about this kind of stuff, because I'm basically saying you're putting your own self and your own organization in jeopardy here. And that's the last thing you want to do.
Just to draw back to the SAP activity, I guess. We all spoke about carbon footprints and the initial thing, but I think what we can do is advocate for material changes and things like that. Governments will respond to policy. If we start pushing our suppliers for products that meet our demands and they can't meet them, then they lose a sale, and that's not what suppliers want. So I think there's a lot of leverage from the industry to impact on what products we can get and how we can make them more economical through proliferation, I guess. And then that sort of makes it easier for government, you know, or clients not to, you know, tick those things off and remove them from projects, because they become less of a perceived impost from a cost benefit, I guess. So, yeah.
So I was actually curious, maybe Wax might be a good one to answer this. Sorry, I did a lot. So in terms of doing a life cycle assessment, we've been looking at obviously the energy side of things, but there's also water, which is a big push, and the GHG emissions. How much priority do you see from clients in terms of just pushing for water or energy? And obviously there's going to be different scales here between you. I was just curious to see the impact and maybe the reaction from clients, and maybe some advice on which way to push harder.
I think it really comes down to the project imperatives and what the client and what sort of project it is, because each project we do, there's such a broad range of expectations and opportunities that it's a little bit hard to specifically answer your question. I think whether or not it's water or whether it is energy or whether it is biodiversity, I think what we sort of sit back and look at is what is it that we can actually help you to champion, and what is it that we can demonstrate to you that the project can provide an opportunity for you to showcase and do better, but also that enable our client to take stewardship of that moving forward. So, I can design the most awesome project, but if I don't have a champion on the client side, that when I finish that project, that they can then take over that mantle, it's lost, it's gone. So how is it that along that process that we have educated our client on the value of the work that we have developed together, so that then they can take ownership of it and manage it and make sure it's effective moving forward. And then they can use that tool to then educate and use it as a demonstration to others who then say, oh, this seems to be working, or this is really cool. Why did you do that? And then they have ownership of that story, and then they can feel that they have achieved something. So I suppose we see ourselves more as facilitators of an outcome rather than a driver, perhaps.
Something that I wanted to say to that, and this is a little bit more about how do you actually sell this kind of stuff to like the information to your clients. So I was harking about, in terms of a sustainability action plan or a carbon neutral journey, you have to get your baseline. You have to actually measure your impact, because if you don't actually measure that, you have no clue what the hotspots are. What do you actually could do, and how much you can, how much of an impact you can make on your own. I think a link to help convince a lot of clients on whether it's in terms of your environmental impact, whether it's water impact, energy impact, health and well-being, like air quality, or indoor environment quality generally, as well as greenhouse gas emissions and converting that to carbon, is that you need to run actually models to be able to get that information. Now, that I don't want to be facetious in saying this, but it's either architecture firms hire a sustainability specialist and to be able to do these modeling, and so you can get quantifiable numbers of how you actually can tell your client, we are saving this much energy, this much water, the daylight is like this. Or you find a good sustainability consultant that can help you make all of these discussions, because it's kind of like the same thing as Hubble, right? It's like, it's a tool to be able to help talk to your client about what impacts does this make. Now, there's going to be people that have expertise in being able to quantify that. So it's either you pair up with them and get that information to actually drive these messages home that you want to be driven, or you become quite literally a multidisciplinary firm and you get the building science in-house. Now, North America does that all the time. When I went to North America, like a US conference, and I said, I'm a sustainability consultant, they're like, so is that an engineering firm or is that an architecture firm? Apparently, it's a UK model of the sustainability consultant that it was brought over here to Australia. So just think really creatively about that. It's like, who are you either training up, bringing into your organization, or who are you going to be working with to help with those conversations? Because you cannot, again, if you don't have the quantifiable information, it's like, yes, there's a cost to that for someone to doing it. But if you don't have that information, how are you going to make any convincing argument? Yes. But any last words from our esteemed panel? Because I think we should wrap up.
As convener of this show, no, just thank you all for coming. Thank the panels. Hopefully, the ambition was to, like Ken mentioned, to get a cross section of people from the industry to give a different representation of what people do, and hopefully you get something from each of it. But it's a journey. You don't have to do everything all at once, but I guess what we want to do is encourage people to set sail. And within the Architects Declare, it is a fairly open forum. we've got lots of firms that are willing to post and put up the things, the material databases, information, things like that. So, you know, no one's guarding their IP too much. There'll be a few firms like that, but generally, we all just want to see everyone move forward. So, yeah, thanks for your time and thank these people for turning up.